All of us use EQ in our songs, in our tracks when we deal with any kind of project. The first plugin that we throw in is definitely an EQ. But the problem is there are a lot of mistakes that we attempt when it comes to EQ without even our knowledge. I'm Florina Jain, otherwise known as Flow of Music, and in this video I'm going to share with you the top 5 common mistakes that all music producers like you and I do when it comes to EQ. So without any delay, let's get started. The first mistake, not using a high pass filter on almost all the tracks that you have in the project. Let me show you why. So if you look at this high ambience, so this is how it sounds. And with the track, so you might be wondering, this is specifically to give you the high frequencies. So I've already added an EQ. I'm just going to mute it for now and open another EQ plugin. I'm going to raise this, okay? So when I raise it, it's only giving me a visual representation of all the frequencies in the track, okay? I'm not increasing or, reducing the gain or anything. So I'm just going to raise this. Let's play and see what the signal comes through this. You can see that there's so much of signal coming in the lower frequencies, okay? If you want to hear just that, I'm just going to put a low pass filter. So all this that comes out, I literally do not need all those signals, right? And they are only adding a lot of unwanted frequencies to my track. So what I need to do is, while the track is being played, put a low cut filter, increase the gain nicely so that it's really nice and steep, and then move this frequency till I don't want, okay? So this seems correct to me, and immediately you can see that all this low end of this track completely goes off, right? Now watch what happens if I keep increasing. So you did realize that when I moved it even further, this track started to sound thin, okay? It's always good to use a low cut filter on every single track, but always make sure to cut the amount that needs to be cut. Don't overcut it and don't lose the frequencies that you need. That's the only main thing. When you do all this clearing of frequencies on every single track, instantly your track will have the clarity and the quality that it needs. Mistake number 2, only using a subtractive EQ type. So I'm going to show you strings. So say for example, your track has a lot of unwanted and harsh frequencies and you really don't like it, so you started cutting all those things out. Yes, now your track is clean, it is tidy, but there are also a lot of frequencies that need to be boosted as well, and that is why those kind of changes that you do are called as additive EQ. So you need to do additive EQ when it is needed, okay? Not all the time, only when it is needed. So for example, if you have a track and if you feel like you need more clarity to it, when you raise some of the high frequencies a little bit, instantly you will get that clarity. So I'll show you what kind of EQ I have done. Look at this. I have some low cut. So if I had stopped till that, yes, it might sound okay. So I'll remove all these. But I felt like this track needed some more of the higher frequencies. So I added a shelf and really boosted the high frequencies. I also added a slight increase in the frequencies around this area. So this is before. Okay, I can instantly listen to a difference in clarity, okay? The same track that had a lot of energy in the mid frequencies now has some energy in the higher frequency as well. giving it more clarity and more shape, okay? So do not always use just subtractive EQ. Don't keep cutting things a lot, okay? Think about the frequencies that you think are good and if you need to increase them. Let's go to mistake number 3. And this aligns with the point that I said previously. Now, when you do subtractive EQs and additive EQs, it's always better you try and use 2 different types of EQ rather than using the same one. So now I have boosted somewhere around 660 Hz and over here around 9550 Hz. Let me just switch that off for now. I'm using this particular EQ only for subtraction. So what I would do next is add another EQ underneath this, except it's going to be a different type. So I'm going to choose Vintage EQ Collections and Vintage Graphic EQ Stereo. So look at this one. It definitely looks different than the traditional EQ that we always use. You can properly cut things. You have the exact frequency value that you want to choose and you can cut them or boost them. But when you compare that to this is more modeled like an analog gear, which means you cannot cut a particular frequency on the exact location, okay? It only has a range for you. For example, you have 8K, you have 250 Hz, you have 16K, you have 4K, 2K, things like that. What I will do right now is increase some of the frequencies in the 500 range and some more in the 8K and in the 16K region. Okay, now let's have a listen to it. So now it's going to play without the additive EQ. Wasn't it clear? It's giving you the clarity and the shape that it had, exactly like how I showed you in the previous step as well. But I'm able to hear a much more better clarity when I used another EQ, especially when it is an analog gear type of an EQ. The reason is all these types of EQ adds more harmonics and depth to your track. Because of all those changes and because of those harmonics, your track will sound even brighter than it was with the other EQ. So that is the reason why sometimes using analog modeled plugins will give you a lot of clarity and a lot of, saturation harmonics to your track, and it'll instantly sound good. And you may not be able to hear those harmonics that well, but imagine you add it to a lot of tracks where you need to do addition, okay? When it comes together, you will hear the difference. And that is the beauty of analog modeled gears, okay? It's not a mistake if you use the same type of EQ. If you need more clarity, if you need more saturation and more quality in your tracks, always don't hesitate to try and use a different type of EQ. Now let's move on to mistake number 4. It is also attached with the third mistake that we spoke about. Always remember that when you are using plugins, you are only using plugins to add some effects to your track, not to increase the volume. The main mistake that people do is not volume match and compare the tracks before and after an EQ, fix the volume based on that. And that is a real big mistake. A lot of people think if you have really high volume, it means you have really good quality. But that is entirely not true. Okay, your clarity and the quality of your tracks will improve depending on the changes you do on the plugins, okay, and what kind of effect you want to give them, not just because the volume is increased. So what you need to do is, if the volume of the track, for example, comes around -5 dB before the EQ plugin, even after the EQ has been applied, the resulting volume must also be -5 dB, okay? It should neither increase nor decrease. That is the important part. Now let's take our example. So right now I did an additive EQ in this part and I've definitely increased some amount of dB in the 500 Hz range and beyond 9000 Hz, right? So definitely there's a volume difference. You just listen to it before and after. Let's open up the mixer to have a better idea, okay? So let's look at this particular number that it shows without EQ. -23.5 is the highest peak. Now I'm going to switch on EQ and let's listen to the same portion. Okay, so it's coming around -22, which means there's a 1 dB increase, right? So what I will do right now is look at this output volume of this EQ plugin. Okay, most plugins that you use will have an overall output volume. Okay, I'm just gonna reduce it by 1 dB. Now let's just do a comparison without the EQ. Minus 23.5 with the EQ. I need a much more reduction, right? So I'm going to do 0.5 dB more reduction. Let's just do 0.2. This is sufficient. So now just listen to it before and after. So without the EQ. So now the volume has been matched, but the clarity has been really enhanced because of these boosting of the high frequencies, okay? The output volume just remains the same. So always remember, this doesn't just apply to EQ. Whatever kind of plugin you use, whether it is EQ or compressor, any kind of plugin, the volume before and after the plugin must remain the same. So do a A/B check and then always check if it is the same. If not, then do the necessary changes. If your plugin doesn't have this output volume kind of thing, what you can do is underneath this plugin, you can add a gain plugin. I'm sure every DAW will have a particular plugin like that. In Logic, it's gain. So you can just add a gain plugin and reduce as much as you want, okay? If your plugin has an output volume, then you don't need to add a gain plugin. Mistake number 5. So if you are working on a project and the client tells you that they want to do a song similar to a reference song, what you need to do is always check the frequency spread of that reference song every time you work with the project, alright? If I do have a reference song, I will put it as my first track. And do you see the stereo out? So I'm going to add a multimeter to it. So let's just go to metering, multimeter, stereo. So I'm going to play my own track and let's see what's happening over here. Okay, so now you can see the entire frequency spread over here, right? Same thing. When you add a reference track, just solo the reference track and look at the multimeter, okay? See whether the lows are high or the highs are boosted even higher. Compare it with your project, okay? And when you do that comparison, you'll have an idea on what frequencies you are yet to, add or subtract depending on that, okay? So with that reference, if you work on your project, it will sound more similar to the reference track that your client has given you. Eventually, you will get the result that you want. Not using a multimeter is a major mistake because you need to know the overall frequency spread of your project and to understand if your project is, traveling towards a goal that you are expecting. For example, if you do an EDM track, take a EDM song from YouTube, put it on your project, alright? Something that matches the vibe of your project. Put a multimeter to that track. Look at the frequency spread. Now mute the reference track, play your project, look at the multimeter. Are those similar to each other? Are both the multimeters of the reference track and your track almost matching each other? Are the mids similar? Are the high frequency similar? Is the low end lesser in your track than in the reference track? So you need to compare it and then make necessary changes, okay? With that perspective, if you work on your tracks, you will be able to hit the right mark and your clients will definitely be happy with the end result, okay? These are the top 5 common mistakes that I have noticed a lot of people do. I've told you multiple ways on how you can avoid it and make better mixes for your song. And if you want to add another point on a common mistake that people do with respect to EQ, do not forget to share it in the comments. If you want to see videos similar to this, if you want to see tutorials on mixing, mastering, do not forget to subscribe to my channel. You can find me on Instagram as well under the name flojane.music. I hope this video was useful. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys in another video.